Hello everyone. Please tell me, which city are you listening from? What time is it there? Is everything okay? Or does it feel like someone's watching you? I don't remember falling asleep. Not exactly, anyway. It wasn't like I'd had a bad night or been particularly restless. I remember the rain. It had been pouring all day, and the sound of it had been constant, like a soft blanket, soothing, yet unyielding. I remember getting comfortable in bed, pulling the covers around me and closing my eyes. The hum of the world outside my window, just the rain, and the occasional creak of the house seemed to lull me into that space where sleep happens without warning. It wasn't the deep sleep I've had before though, where you fade into nothingness and wake up feeling like you've traveled miles in your dreams. No, this felt different. It was a slow descent, like sinking into something soft but heavy at the same time. A thick fog that clouded my thoughts and pulled me under. But I didn't remember the moment I fell asleep. It wasn't even as if I drifted off with a sense of peace. There was no gradual fade, it just stopped. One moment I was laying there, staring at the ceiling, and the next I opened my eyes. And I was here. I say here, but I don't know what I mean by that exactly. It was my room. Well, it looked like my room, but it didn't feel right. The walls were the same soft blue-eyed chosen years ago, and the bed was where it always was, piled with the same blankets. But there was something wrong, something off. The light, or lack of it, perhaps. It was still raining, but the light coming through the window felt strange. Dim, not quite natural, like the sky outside had folded into itself and refused to let in anything other than a muted gray. The shadows in the corners of the room didn't seem like shadows at all. They were too solid, almost like they were waiting, poised to shift. I sat up slowly, feeling the weight of my limbs as though they were heavier than usual. The rain outside kept its rhythm, constant and calming, but it didn't bring the comfort it used to. Instead, it felt intrusive, unwelcome, somehow. The quiet thrum of the raindrops against the window was like the ticking of a clock, reminding me that time was moving, but I couldn't quite remember when it started. The clock on my bedside table blinked its numbers in the half-darkness. *317 am*. It felt so wrong. I always slept soundly, but this time, it didn't make sense. How had I gotten here? What had happened between the last thought I had before closing my eyes and this strange waking? I pushed the covers off, my feet touching the cold wooden floor. I paused for a moment, listening. There was nothing unusual. The rain, the creaking of the house settling, a distant sound of wind brushing against the eaves. But the silence now that I was listening was unsettling. It was a silence after something, not before. I stood and walked toward the window, drawn to the strange quiet outside. The glass was fogged up, but I didn't know why. The rain should have kept it clear. Shouldn't it have? I wiped my hand across the window and peered out into the yard, where the shapes of trees loomed like dark sentinels against the night. The rain was still relentless, but the world outside looked wrong, too still, too unmoving. No wind rustling through the leaves, no animals seeking shelter from the storm. That's when I first heard it, a whisper, soft, too soft to be sure of, coming from the corner of the room. I froze. The sound was gone almost immediately, as if it had never been there, but the feeling lingered like someone had just breathed. Behind me, I turned quickly, my heart thudding in my chest, but the room was empty. The shadows in the corners shifted slightly, not enough to be noticeable, but enough to be felt. I tried to convince myself it was just the rain, the wind playing tricks on my mind, but my hands were trembling. I had to get out of there, to move, to do something. The oppressive stillness was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I reached for the door and stepped into the hallway. The wood beneath my feet was colder than I remembered, and as I made my way toward the stairs, I could hear the faintest of sounds, like someone was walking just behind me. But no one was there. The faint, rhythmic tap-tap of bare feet on the floor. I paused, half turning, but still, there was nothing. No one. Just the rain and the thick, muffled silence. Downstairs, the living room was dark, lit only by the soft glow of streetlights filtering through the blinds. The house felt too quiet. I could hear every creak of the floorboards, every faint rustle of the air, and every distant drop of rain. Outside, but there was no sound of life. No hum of the refrigerator, no click of a light switch being turned off. It felt as if the house was holding its breath, waiting for something, but what? I wandered through the house, moving from room to room, each one feeling more empty than the last. The clock on the kitchen wall read 3:23 a.m. now. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been awake for hours, even though I knew I hadn't. My mind was muddled, my thoughts cloudy, but something was digging at me, like I was missing a piece of the puzzle, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find it. And then, in the back of the house, I saw it. The door to the basement. The door was always closed when I went to bed. Always. But now, it was ajar. The dim light from the hallway spilling into the darkened stairwell below. I didn't remember opening it. I wouldn't have opened it. I couldn't move. I couldn't bring myself to go closer. The whispers came again, this time louder. Not from behind me, but from below. Low, indistinct voices, layered over one another, like a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. The room felt too small, too close, and the rain outside wasn't comforting anymore. It was suffocating, like a prison. I stepped closer to the door, drawn to it despite every instinct telling me to turn and run, to leave the house, to forget this whole night ever happened. I hesitated, but something compelled me to push the door further open. A gust of cold air brushed against my face, and the whispers grew clearer, more distinct. My heart pounded in my chest as I peered into the basement, trying to make sense of the shadows that danced at the edges of the room. But there was nothing, just darkness. The whispers stopped, replaced by the sound of my breathing, loud in the silence. I don't remember what happened after that. I wish I could tell you. I wish I could explain why I stood there, in front of that basement door, for so long. I don't even know if I went down there, or if I just turned around and went back to bed. I'm not sure I'll ever know. But I do know this. I haven't woken up yet. Not really. I'm still here, in this room, in this house. And no matter how many times I check the clock, it always says the same thing, 3:17 a.m. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember waking up, but I can feel it now, the waiting. And I can hear the whispers again, this time from behind me. It started off so simple. At least, that's how I remember it. She called me by my name at first, and it felt normal. It felt right. I'd been staying at her place for a few days, just a brief visit. We were catching up after months of being out of touch. Life had a way of pulling us in different directions, and though I tried to keep in contact, it wasn't always easy. I'd never been very good with names, but when she called me by mine, it was as if it belonged to me, a comforting sound that wrapped around me. "Hey John," she would say, her voice warm, the kind that made me feel like everything would be okay. I remember feeling a little embarrassed at how I had neglected to reach out more, but she didn't seem to mind. We spent the evening talking about the old days, sharing stories about school, family, and our lives since then. The first time it happened, I didn't think much of it. She called me by the wrong name, but that was just a slip-up, right? A harmless mistake. I didn't even want to mention it. She was probably just tired. She had been working a lot recently. "Hey Paul," she said, smiling at me from the kitchen as she handed me a cup of coffee. My mind paused. Paul, it's not a name I had ever been called. I wasn't Paul. I'm John. I stared at her for a moment, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't the type to forget names. She remembered everything, even the smallest details. It was part of what made her such a good friend. So why had she called me Paul? It's actually John, I said slowly, raising an eyebrow. She blinked, momentarily confused, and then laughed. Right, sorry. I don't know what I was thinking, John. You know how my mind works when I'm tired. I laughed it off, but something shifted in me. I tried to brush it aside. She had a lot on her plate, and we had been talking for hours. People slip up, right? But then, it happened again. The next morning, we were eating breakfast, and she leaned in to ask me if I wanted more eggs. "Paul, do you want some more eggs?" she asked, setting the bowl down in front of me. My chest tightened. I stared at her, a little more taken aback this time, again. "It's John," I said, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. "I'm John, not Paul." She furrowed her brow, as if trying to piece something together in her mind. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I keep doing that. Paul's, well, he was an old friend of mine, but that was years ago. Maybe I'm just not fully awake. You're John, I know that." I nodded, but her words didn't sit right. Why would she keep confusing me with someone named Paul? It didn't make sense. No matter how much I told myself it was a mistake, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Later that day, we went out for a walk. The air was cool, and the clouds hung low in the sky, casting a dim light over the quiet neighborhood. The kind of gray sky that makes everything feel just a little too still. We talked about everything and nothing: work, life, the future. I mentioned that I was planning on heading back home soon, back to my apartment in the city. "Paul, I think you're going to love the new coffee shop near my place," she said, her voice casual, as if she hadn't even noticed what she'd just said. I stopped in my tracks. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Why do you keep calling me Paul?" I blurted, a little harsher than I meant to be. Her face immediately shifted, a look of confusion taking over. "What are you talking about?" she asked, clearly bewildered. "You've called me Paul 3 times now, and I'm not Paul. I'm John. I don't understand why you keep doing this." Her expression faltered for just a moment before she smiled again, though it didn't reach her eyes. This time, "I'm sorry, John. I don't know. I think I'm just distracted lately. It's nothing, let's just forget it." But I couldn't forget it. Not anymore. There was something about her response, the way she waved it off, that unsettled me more than the name itself. She'd never acted like this before. She was always calm, always aware of what was going on around her. It felt like she was brushing me off, pretending like it was nothing, but something in her eyes told me she knew it was more than that. As the days went on, it only got worse. Each time she called me Paul, the unease grew, and each time she apologized, the apology felt emptier. I began to dread hearing that name, that word that didn't belong to me. It started to chip away at me, like I wasn't who I thought I was. Was she gaslighting me? Was she losing her mind? I didn't know, but I couldn't let it go. Something was happening here, something I couldn't explain. The worst part was that she seemed too calm about it. It was like she was in on a secret that I wasn't a part of. Every apology sounded rehearsed. Every excuse felt like it had been made up on the spot. But why, and why me? Why was she calling me by a name that wasn't mine? On the last night of my stay, I sat in the living room, watching the rain streak against the windows. The house was quiet, too quiet. She was upstairs, doing something, but the silence in the house felt oppressive, like something was waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her, ask her why this was happening. I walked up to her room and knocked lightly on the door. There was no response. I knocked again, harder this time, still nothing. I opened the door, half expecting her to be standing there with that apologetic smile of hers, but the room was empty. The bed was perfectly made, untouched. The air in the room felt stale, like it had been closed off for days. My stomach dropped. Then, on the dresser, I saw something. A picture frame, tilted slightly. It wasn't there before. I picked it up. In the picture, there was Mimi sitting on the couch, smiling. But beside me, there was a woman I didn't recognize. She had long, dark hair, and her eyes were locked onto the camera with an intensity I couldn't explain. And then, I saw it. The woman's name, written in a sharp, neat script on the bottom of the photo. Paul. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't understand. I wasn't Paul. I was John. I had always been John. I turned back toward the door. My heart racing, my mind spinning, but when I looked down the hallway, the silence stretched out before me, stretching impossibly long. And then, I heard it, the soft sound of footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate, but not from anywhere near me. It was as if someone was walking toward me from just behind the door. I don't know how I ended up outside, standing in the rain, but I was. My clothes were soaked through, and the chill in the air bit into my skin, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I don't remember how long I stood there, but I do remember one thing, the name she kept calling me, over and over. Like a whisper in the back of my mind, Paul. It wasn't supposed to be anything special. I remember the day I bought the mirror. It was an old, vintage piece, the kind you find in thrift shops, where the frame is a little chipped but has a certain charm to it. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a little something to brighten up the corner of my apartment. A mirror seemed like the perfect solution. It was small, oval-shaped, framed in dark wood, and it had that faint, smoky tint to the glass that hinted at years of use. I hung it up near the hallway, right across from the coat rack. It fit perfectly, a nice little touch. For the first few days, everything was fine. I passed by it every now and then, glancing at my reflection briefly, checking my hair or adjusting my outfit. Nothing too remarkable. But that's when it started. Subtle at first. So subtle that I couldn't quite tell if I was imagining things or if there was something genuinely off about it. The first time I noticed it was in the evening. I was getting ready for work, standing in front of the mirror, when I caught a glimpse of something that didn't quite line up. I looked at my reflection and adjusted my tie, but there was something odd. The clothes I was wearing, they weren't the ones I had on. I blinked, sure that I had just misjudged it. The outfit in the mirror wasn't mine. The suit was a different shade of gray, and the tie was a deeper red, almost burgundy, something I didn't own. I stepped back, staring at the reflection, trying to make sense of it. But when I looked down, I saw the exact clothes I had put on: a simple blue shirt and a dark gray suit jacket, nothing like the rich burgundy and deep gray of the man in the mirror. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. Just tired, I muttered to myself. Just need more sleep. I convinced myself that I was imagining it. After all, who would notice something so small? But that night, as I brushed my teeth before bed, I passed the mirror again. And again, the man staring back at me wasn't dressed the way I was. This time, it was worse. He was wearing a completely different outfit, one I was sure I had never seen. A light brown overcoat, dark trousers, a scarf that wasn't mine. I froze, staring at it, my toothbrush still in my mouth. The reflection in the mirror stood still, a perfect imitation of me, but I didn't recognize the clothes. I didn't even know where they came from. I shook my head, as though willing the vision to disappear. My heart was pounding, but when I looked down at myself, I was still wearing my pajamas. I wasn't even dressed for bed yet. I rushed past the mirror, closing my eyes as I did. The next day, I tried to put it out of my mind. I convinced myself it was a trick of the light, or maybe I was just overly tired. But something kept pulling me back to it. The next few days were worse. Every time I passed by the mirror, I noticed it more and more. The clothes in the reflection were never mine. Sometimes, they were dressed in formal business attire. Other times, casual, but never anything I wore. It was always the same man, too. A version of myself, but not me. His eyes never quite looked right, too cold, too distant. He looked like a stranger wearing my face. I tried switching things up. One evening, I wore a sweater I hadn't worn in months, hoping it would be different. I stepped in front of the mirror, expecting the reflection to be what I saw. My familiar sweater, the comfortable one I hadn't worn in ages. But the reflection showed a completely different sweater, a thin turtleneck design I could never remember owning. In a dark shade of green, I ran my fingers along the sweater I was wearing. The one I knew was real, and then back at the mirror. The stranger in the glass smiled, just a slight upturn of his lips. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was almost smug, like he knew something I didn't. It made my stomach twist, and I had to look away. I thought about getting rid of the mirror. I thought about tossing it out, but something kept me from doing it. It was as though the mirror was keeping me there, keeping me in that space where I couldn't quite escape. Every time I tried to leave, the reflection seemed to draw me back, pull me into it, like it was waiting for me to return. But then, last night, it happened. I hadn't even noticed how much time had passed, but I found myself standing in front of the mirror again. This time, it wasn't just the clothes that were wrong. I was different. The man in the mirror didn't look like me anymore, not entirely. His face was older, more worn. His eyes were darker, almost hollow. His hair was a mess, and he looked so tired. And then, the reflection moved on its own. It wasn't a delayed reflection like before. It was as if it had a life of its own. The man in the mirror slowly raised his hand to the glass, his fingers gently brushing the surface, as if he was reaching out to me. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body was frozen in place. My eyes locked onto his, and then he smiled. A wide, knowing grin that stretched impossibly far across his face. He knew something I didn't. He was wearing my face, my clothes, but I wasn't the one standing there. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The air felt thick, like I couldn't breathe, like the mirror was pulling me in, making it hard to move, hard to think. But then, just as suddenly as it began, the reflection went back to normal. It was me again, in my blue shirt and gray suit, standing quietly in front of the mirror, just like I had been. But I knew what had happened, and now I'm not sure if I'm the one standing in front of it anymore. I haven't gone near the mirror since, but sometimes, when I pass by, I still catch a glimpse of him. He's always there, staring back at me with that same smile, always wearing clothes I don't own, and I don't think I'm ever going to get rid of it, because sometimes, when I look at my reflection, I wonder if the man staring back at me is really me at all. It was supposed to be a short nap. I remember that much. I had been feeling drained for weeks, late nights at work, endless meetings, and never enough hours in the day to just beyond. My body finally started protesting. I thought a nap would help. Just an hour or two, I told myself. A reset. I pulled the curtains shut, set my alarm, and sank into the bed, letting the weight of exhaustion pull me under. But when I opened my eyes again, everything felt off. The room was dim, but that was nothing new. The light in my apartment never felt quite right, no matter the time of day. But something about the stillness in the air was different, thicker somehow, like time had stretched and twisted. I glanced at the clock beside the bed. It was 8:03 p.m. I squinted at the digits, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The date on the clock flashed next, and I froze. February 13th, I blinked. That wasn't possible. I had gone to sleep. On August 13th, at least, that's what I thought. It felt like I'd been asleep for weeks, but how could it be that long? I reached for my phone on the bedside table, my heart beginning to race, and unlocked it with shaky hands. The screen lit up, showing me notifications, messages from friends and family, all from the last 6 months. My stomach twisted. How could I not remember? How had I slept for that long? I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself it was just confusion. It had to be. I had been deeply tired, after all. But the feeling of dread clung to me, tightening with every second that passed. I pulled myself out of bed, the weight of my body feeling different, heavier. Sluggish, as though I hadn't used it properly in months. I walked to the bathroom, hoping to shake the strange sensation, but when I looked in the mirror, my reflection almost made me recoil. I looked wrong. My face, my eyes, my expression, they were all older. There were faint lines around my eyes, shadows that hadn't been there before. My hair, which I remembered having trimmed just a few weeks ago, was longer, tangled in a way that felt unfamiliar. It was as if the past 6 months had happened to me without my consent, without me being awake for them. I didn't recognize myself. I splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't help. The feeling lingered. I went back to my room and checked the calendar on the wall, my fingers trembling as I traced the date, February 13th. It was as if the last 6 months had been stolen from me. As if I'd been locked in a state of sleep without any awareness of the time passing. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through the messages, searching for something, anything that would help me make sense of what had happened. But all I found was a series of texts from my sister, starting from the day I had fallen asleep. "Hey, you've been asleep for so long. I'm getting worried. Please wake up. I don't know what's going on, but it's been weeks. I need you to answer." The messages grew more frantic as they went on, until the last one, which was just a string of question marks and "please, I need to know you're okay." I tried calling her, my hands shaking, but the phone just rang and rang. No answer. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything pressing down on me. How could this be possible? I felt trapped, like I was living in a world that had moved on without me. I tried to think back, to remember anything from the past 6 months. But all I had was blank space. There was nothing, just a void. No memories of what happened, no sense of where I had been, or who I had seen. It was like I had been locked in some kind of stasis, frozen in time while the world continued without me. I needed to leave the apartment, to go out and breathe fresh air, to try and make sense of all this. But before I could move, the doorbell rang. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of who would be at the door. I hadn't seen anyone in weeks, months, even according to the calendar, but I pushed the unease down and went to answer it. Standing outside was a woman I didn't recognize. She was holding a small package, the kind you'd get from a delivery service, but it wasn't addressed to me. It had my name on it, yes, but the address was wrong. It was like it had been sent to someone else who lived here, but somehow it had made its way to me. "Are you John?" she asked. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. I nodded slowly, still too stunned to speak. She handed me the package. "You've been asleep for a long time," she said, her tone colder now, like she was stating a fact rather than offering comfort. "I was starting to think you'd never wake up." Before I could respond, before I could even think, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the evening, leaving me standing there, alone with the package in my hands. I looked down at it, feeling an intense, overwhelming sense of dread. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to know what was inside, but I couldn't stop myself. I tore it open quickly, my heart racing, only to find another journal, just like the one I'd seen earlier, but this one was different. It wasn't filled with my handwriting. It was a perfect match to mine, yes, but it wasn't my words. It was a record of the 6 months I'd supposedly been asleep, A recounting of events that never happened to me, of things I didn't remember doing. There were details, stories, even personal moments that I had never lived through. And then, at the very end, the last entry made my blood run cold. She said, "I've slept for 6 months. It's only been a week." My head spun. I couldn't breathe. The world felt like it was closing in on me. The weight of the journal, the strange woman, the absence of time, it was too much. Something wasn't right. I wasn't just waking up from a nap. I had missed something. Something important. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know if I had been asleep or if I had somehow been alive for the past 6 months. And now, as I sit here, holding that journal, I'm beginning to wonder if I'm still asleep. It was supposed to be a short nap. I remember that much. I had been feeling drained for weeks, late nights at work, endless meetings, and never enough hours in the day to just be in. My body finally started protesting. I thought a nap would help. Just an hour or two, I told myself. A reset. I pulled the curtains shut, set my alarm, and sank into the bed, letting the weight of exhaustion pull me under. But when I opened my eyes again, everything felt off. The room was dim, but that was nothing new. The light in my apartment never felt quite right, no matter the time of day. But something about the stillness in the air was different, thicker somehow, like time had stretched and twisted. I glanced at the clock beside the bed. It was 8:03 p.m. I squinted at the digits, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The date on the clock flashed next, and I froze. February 13th, I blinked. That wasn't possible. I had gone to sleep. On August 13th, at least, that's what I thought. It felt like I'd been asleep for weeks, but how could it be that long? I reached for my phone on the bedside table, my heart beginning to race, and unlocked it with shaky hands. The screen lit up, showing me notifications, messages from friends and family, all from the last 6 months. My stomach twisted. How could I not remember? How had I slept for that long? I tried to push the thoughts away, telling myself it was just confusion. It had to be. I had been deeply tired, after all. But the feeling of dread clung to me, tightening with every second that passed. I pulled myself out of bed, the weight of my body feeling different, heavier, sluggish as though I hadn't used it properly in months. I walked to the bathroom, hoping to shake the strange sensation, but when I looked in the mirror, my reflection almost made me recoil. I looked wrong. My face, my eyes, my expression, they were all older. There were faint lines around my eyes, shadows that hadn't been there before. My hair, which I remembered having trimmed just a few weeks ago, was longer, tangled in a way that felt unfamiliar. It was as if the past 6 months had happened to me without my consent, without me being awake for them. I didn't recognize myself. I splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't help. The feeling lingered. I went back to my room and checked the calendar on the wall, my fingers trembling as I traced the date, February 13th. It was as if the last 6 months had been stolen from me, as if I had been locked in a state of sleep without any awareness of the time passing. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through the messages, searching for something, anything that would help me make sense of what had happened. But all I found was a series of texts from my sister, starting from the day I had fallen asleep. "Hey, you've been asleep for so long. I'm getting worried. Please wake up." I don't know what's going on, but it's been weeks. I need you to answer. The messages grew more frantic as they went on, until the last one, which was just a string of question marks and please, I need to know you're okay. I tried calling her, my hands shaking, but the phone just rang and rang. No answer. I sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of everything pressing down on me. How could this be possible? I felt trapped, like I was living in a world that had moved on without me. I tried to think back, to remember anything from the past 6 months. But all I had was blank space. There was nothing, just a void. No memories of what happened. No sense of where I had been, or who I had seen. It was like I had been locked in some kind of stasis, frozen in time while the world continued without me. I needed to leave the apartment, to go out and breathe fresh air, to try and make sense of all this. But before I could move, the doorbell rang. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of who would be at the door. I hadn't seen anyone in weeks, months, even according to the calendar. But I pushed the unease down and went to answer it. Standing outside was a woman I didn't recognize. She was holding a small package, the kind you'd get from a delivery service. But it wasn't addressed to me. It had my name on it, yes, but the address was wrong. It was like it had been sent to someone else who lived here, but somehow it had made its way to me. "Are you John?" she asked. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. I nodded slowly, still too stunned to speak. She handed me the package. "You've been asleep for a long time," she said, her tone colder now, like she was stating a fact rather than offering comfort. I was starting to think you'd never wake up. Before I could respond, before I could even think, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the evening, leaving me standing there alone with the package in my hands. I looked down at it, feeling an intense, overwhelming sense of dread. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to know what was inside, but I couldn't stop myself. I tore it open quickly, my heart racing, only to find another journal, just like the one I'd seen earlier, but this one was different. It wasn't filled with my handwriting. It was a perfect match to mine, yes, but it wasn't my words. It was a record of the 6 months I'd supposedly been asleep, a recounting of events that never happened to me, of things I didn't remember doing. There were details, stories, even personal moments that I had never lived through, and then, at the very end, the last entry made my blood run cold. She said, "I've slept for 6 months. It's only been a week." My head spun. I couldn't breathe. The world felt like it was closing in on me. The weight of the journal, the strange woman, the absence of time, it was too much. Something wasn't right. I wasn't just waking up from a nap. I had missed something important. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know if I had been asleep or if I had somehow been alive for the past 6 months. And now, as I sit here, holding that journal, I'm beginning to wonder if I'm still asleep. I used to think it was just a coincidence, a storybook my grandmother had given me when I was young. Something old and tattered, with pages that had turned yellow over the years. She used to read it to me before bed, every night, without fail. The story was simple enough, a fairy tale, full of magical creatures, enchanted forests, and mysterious prophecies. I loved it, even as a child, because it felt like something out of a dream. but there was one thing that always stood out to me, one passage in the book that always made me pause. It was a part near the end, where the young hero, after facing many trials and tribulations, finds himself at a crossroads. The story said he will come to a choice, one that could alter the course of his life forever. He will see the paths ahead, but one will seem familiar, as if it has already been walked before. I never gave it much thought as a kid. It was just a line in a book, after all. But as I grew older, the words began to haunt me. Something about them felt unsettling. A sense of déjà vu crept in every time I remembered that passage. It was almost as if the words themselves were more than just fiction, they felt real. As if they were speaking to something deep within me, something I couldn't quite explain. Then, one night, something strange happened. I was reading the same book, the one my grandmother had given me, now tattered with age and worn with use. It was late, and I had a few minutes before sleep would claim me, so I thought I'd indulge in some childhood nostalgia. But when I turned the pages, I found a section I didn't remember reading before, even though I was sure I'd read the entire book countless times. The new page was faded, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. I ran my fingers over the words, my heart skipping a beat. It was the same passage I remembered, but now it wasn't just the story anymore. The text had changed. The hero, he wasn't just facing a choice. It was my choice. The paths described were eerily similar to the ones I'd been standing at for months. The page described a young man who had been working hard for years, climbing a career ladder, only to find that it led to a place he didn't want to be. He had a choice: stay and continue walking the path that everyone expected him to take, or leave it all behind and step into the unknown, taking a risk that would change everything. The words were so familiar, so hauntingly similar to the exact situation I found myself in, that I had to stop reading. How could this be? Was it possible that the story had somehow predicted my life? It wasn't just the situation, it was the way the words described my emotions, the confusion and the fear of choosing a new path, the uncertainty of the future. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a coincidence. After all, many people face tough choices in life, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that the book was guiding me. Every detail in that passage was too specific, too close to what I had been experiencing. It was as if the author knew me. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept coming back to that page, reading it over and over, each time finding something new, something that spoke directly to me. The deeper I went into the book, the more I realized that the story wasn't just a story, it was a map, a guide to the very choices I was facing in my own life. Every decision, every path I was considering, had somehow been laid out in that book years before I even made them. The book spoke about a fork in the road, where the hero would have to decide between safety and uncertainty, between the life he knew and the life he was meant to live. The strange thing was, I had already reached that exact point in my life. I had a secure job, a comfortable routine, but something deep inside told me it wasn't where I was meant to be. I was restless, yearning for something more, something different, but the fear of the unknown held me back. And then, a week later, I received a job offer. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I had dreamed of, a chance to work with a company I admired. A chance to start fresh and leave the life I had built behind. It was everything I had wanted, but it came with risks. The stability I had built, the security I had worked so hard for, would all be gone if I took it. That night, as I sat on my bed, staring at the offer letter, I couldn't help but think back to the book. He will come to a choice, one that could alter the course of his life forever. The words were ringing in my ears. I couldn't deny the connection. It was as if the book had predicted this moment. I had reached the very crossroads described within its pages. I closed my eyes and let the weight of the decision settle in. For the first time, I let myself imagine what my life could be like if I took the leap. The fear was still there, gnawing at me, but so was the excitement, the hope that I could be more than what I was. The next morning, I signed the job offer. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. I packed up my things, said goodbye to my old job, and stepped into a new chapter. As I drove to my new office on the first day, I couldn't help but feel like the story was playing out in real life. I was the hero, walking the path that had been laid out for me in those old pages. The path that felt right, even though it was uncertain. Now, months later, I look back at that decision and realize that the book didn't just predict my life, it helped me understand it. I'm not sure how it works, or why it happened, but I know that the words I read all those years ago were more than just fiction. They were a guide, a prophecy, something that showed me the way when I couldn't see it myself. And sometimes, when I feel lost or uncertain about the future, I still pick up that old book and read it again. It's funny how something written long ago can feel so familiar, like it was meant for me all along. It's almost as if the story was waiting for me to catch up, to take the steps that were always meant to be mine. The strange thing is, I haven't reached the end of the story yet. But every day feels like a new page, and I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story will continue to predict my life one chapter at a time. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the mind, maybe a side effect of the stress I'd been under. After all, who wouldn't be a little disoriented after weeks of late nights and early mornings? But the strange feeling only grew stronger. With each passing day, it started small. One morning, I woke up and looked in the mirror, only to see a subtle difference in my face. My jawline seemed a little sharper, my eyes a bit wider, the shape of my nose slightly different. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and leaned in closer, hoping to find some logical explanation. Maybe the lighting was just off, or perhaps I was still half asleep. It wasn't too different, but something was definitely wrong. At first I shrugged it off. I'd been working long hours and had barely been getting any sleep. Perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me, adjusting how I saw myself. After all that exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up again, and the feeling returned, but this time, it was even more pronounced. My reflection seemed different in ways that were harder to ignore. The shape of my lips had changed. They were fuller now, more pronounced. The curve of my brow, the line of my cheekbones, it was like I was looking at a stranger. My face was the same, but it wasn't my face. I didn't feel like me. I tried to convince myself that it was just the effects of lack of rest, that perhaps I wasn't fully awake, but something deep inside me started to feel unsettled. There was no denying it anymore. I wasn't waking up as the same person every time I began to track it. The next day, I made a conscious effort to study my reflection, to look at every inch of myself. When I woke up, I examined my face carefully. This time, my eyes were narrower, the angle of my cheeks more pronounced, and my hair was messier than usual, like it had a life of its own. I snapped a picture of myself with my phone to confirm what I was seeing. The face in the photo was different from the one I had just seen in the mirror a few hours before. I started taking notes, writing down every little change I noticed, and comparing the photos. The differences were so subtle, but they were always there, and they were always new. My face was changing in ways I couldn't explain, like I was waking up as a completely different version of myself each morning. Some days, I would look older, my skin losing its youthful glow. Other days, I would look younger, like I hadn't aged a day. It wasn't just about the physical appearance either. There was an eerie shift in my expression too, like I wasn't even wearing my own emotions. I went to a doctor, thinking maybe something was wrong. I explained the situation to him, how every time I woke up, my reflection looked different. At first, he seemed skeptical. He asked if I had been under stress, if I had been drinking enough water, if I had been sleeping well. I nodded, explaining that I hadn't been the best at taking care of myself lately, but I still felt like I wasn't getting to the root of the issue. The doctor referred me to a psychologist, suggesting it might be related to stress or even a dissociative disorder. I went to the session, though I didn't feel much better after that. The psychologist asked me to do some exercises, asked me to write down my feelings, to look into my past and my childhood. I told her everything, every tiny little thing I could remember, but the more I spoke, the more I realized that none of it explained the way I woke up looking different every day. I started staying home more, avoiding mirrors. I began to wear hats and sunglasses, even indoors, just to avoid seeing myself. I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore, the feeling that I wasn't me. Who was I, really? I couldn't even recognize myself when I looked into a mirror. But it didn't stop there. One morning I woke up, and I didn't recognize the person in the mirror at all. The face I saw this time, it wasn't just the shape of my features or the expression. It was someone else, a complete stranger. The eyes were colder, the mouth thinner, the hair longer. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, staring at the unfamiliar face. I blinked, and then it blinked back. I wasn't sure if I was still asleep, but everything felt too real. I touched my face, feeling the unfamiliar skin under my fingers, and my breath caught in my chest. Who was this person? Why had they taken my place? It wasn't just a different version of me anymore. It was a completely new person, someone with my body but not my soul. The panic rose inside me, a cold wave that hit me with full force. I called my sister, my voice shaking, telling her what had happened. She didn't understand at first, saying I was probably just tired, that maybe I was imagining it. But when I sent her a picture of myself, a new face, one I didn't even recognize, she went quiet. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the phone. "What's going on?" she whispered, and the way she said it wasn't disbelief. It was fear. She sounded as if she knew something I didn't. The days that followed became a blur. I couldn't stay in one place for long. I kept changing. always waking up to a new version of myself, always feeling like I was losing myself a little more each time. Sometimes I would look in the mirror and not even recognize the person staring back at me. They had my body, my eyes, but not my soul, not my life. It was as if I had become a vessel, a shell for someone else. One night, I was sitting at home, staring at the pictures of the different faces I had seen, and I realized something. The faces weren't random. They were familiar. They were people I had known in my life. People I had forgotten about. Or perhaps I hadn't even consciously remembered. Old friends, strangers from my past, faces from photographs I had long tucked away. But now, it wasn't just my face changing. It was me changing, shifting into someone else entirely. And now, I don't know who I am anymore. Every time I wake up, I'm different. I look different, feel different, but nothing stays the same. I don't know if I'm becoming someone else or if I'm losing myself entirely. All I know is that every time I close my eyes and sleep, I never know what face I'll wake up to, or if I'll still be here at all. Maybe one day, I'll wake up, and I won't recognize myself at all. Maybe I'll never wake up as me again. It started on a Tuesday morning, just like any other. I was at home, scrolling through my phone, sipping coffee, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I got up to answer it anyway. I opened the door, half expecting a delivery. Or maybe a neighbor asking for something, but standing on my doorstep was a woman. She looked so much like me that it made my heart skip a beat. I mean, exactly like me. Same dark hair, same eyes, same build. She could have been my twin. But there was something off about her, something unsettling. "Hi," she said, her voice sounding like my own. "Can I come in?" I froze for a second, my mind racing. I couldn't figure out why this stranger, who looked like me in every way, would be standing at my door, acting like it was the most natural thing in the world. Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking just a little. She smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was something darker, like she knew something I didn't. "It's me. You know me. I've come to see you. You've been avoiding me." I stepped back, instinctively, my hand resting on the doorframe, unsure of what was happening. My heart pounded in my chest. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I don't know you. I don't. Who are you? What do you want?" She tilted her head, like she was considering how to explain it to me. "I don't know why you're acting like this. It's you. It's always been you. You don't remember, but you've been me for years now. And you've been running. It's time you came back." I closed the door slightly, panic rising in my chest. My mind was racing, but I couldn't think clearly what was happening. Why was she saying these things? I barely knew this woman, but she was standing on my doorstep, telling me things that made no sense. "I'm not you," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "I don't know what you want, but I am me. This is my life. I don't know you. I don't." The woman's face softened for a moment, and then a strange calm washed over her. She stepped forward, pushing the door open with ease, as if it was her place to be there. "It's all right," she said in a quiet, almost soothing voice. "You don't have to fight it. It's just that I've been trying to wake you up for so long. I've missed you." My legs buckled slightly as she stepped inside, her eyes never leaving mine. I had no idea how she was so calm, how she was acting like everything was normal when it was so clearly not. I backed away from her, shaking my head, trying to make sense of everything that was happening. "No," I said, my voice strained. "This isn't right. This isn't. Who are you? What do you want from me?" The woman just smiled again, that same eerie, knowing smile. "I told you, I'm you. I'm the one you've been running from." I couldn't understand what was going on. I didn't know her. She wasn't me. She couldn't be. And yet, the more I looked at her, the more I felt wrong, like she had something I was missing. Like she was wearing my life, my memories, like she had taken all of me and left me with a hollow version of myself. She walked into my living room and sat on the couch as though she had every right to be there. She crossed her legs and looked at me, the calmness never leaving her expression. "I've been waiting for you to remember. All those years, I've been waiting." I felt my chest tighten. "Remember what?" Her eyes darkened slightly, the smile never fading. "The truth, what happened, what we did." Suddenly, images flashed in my mind, broken, fragmented pieces. A night dark, cold. I was there, but so was she. A decision had been made, but I couldn't remember what that decision was. My mind flickered in and out of focus as I struggled to make sense of the strange memories. My hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table for support. "You're lying," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't remember any of this. I don't know you." You do know me," she interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. "You do remember. You just have to stop running, stop pretending. I've been here, in this body, in this life. It's been me, all along. And now, it's time for you to come back." I staggered backward, tripping over the edge of the couch. Her words swirled in my mind, and the more I tried to push them away, the more they stuck. It's been me. She was me. But she wasn't. She couldn't be. I didn't understand how it could be true. This woman, standing before me, this stranger, had my memories. She knew things about my life, things only I should know. And yet, I felt like I had never seen her before. Her face was so familiar, but I couldn't place her. How could someone be me and yet be someone else? Her smile softened again, but there was something terrifying in her eyes now. A glint of satisfaction, as though she'd won some battle. I didn't know we were having. She stood up and came closer, her steps so slow, so deliberate. "You don't have to be afraid of me," she said, reaching for my hand. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to bring you back. I'm here to make it right." I pulled my hand back, my breath shallow, my mind whirling. This was all too much. I didn't know who she was, but I could feel it deep inside me. Her presence was suffocating, like she had been living inside of me for so long and had finally broken free. She reached out again, but this time, her hand didn't stop. She touched my arm gently, and I felt an icy chill spread through my skin. "I am you," she whispered softly, "and I always will be." And in that moment, I realized what was happening. I wasn't the one who had forgotten her. It was her. She had my memories. But she wasn't me, and I wasn't sure who was real anymore. I used to think it was just the stress, or maybe something in the air that was making me feel this way. But now, I'm not so sure. I had no idea it would happen like this, how the line between what's real and what isn't would blur to the point of no return. But the dreams, they're starting to replace the real world. Slowly, insidiously, until I don't know where one ends and the other begins. It started about a month ago. I'd been working long hours, hardly ever leaving my apartment. The pressure to finish projects, deadlines piling up one after another, kept me trapped in front of my desk, clicking away at the keyboard late into the night. It was always dark when I'd finally look up, and by then, my mind would be too tired to distinguish 1 hour from the next. The first night it happened, I thought nothing of it. I'd been burning the candle at both ends, and it was no surprise I'd fallen asleep in the middle of the afternoon. I closed my eyes for what felt like a moment, but when I opened them, again, hours had passed. The light outside was different, and I could hear the muffled sound of rain hitting the window. The air felt heavier, more oppressive. But what truly caught my attention wasn't the time difference, or the rain, or the fact that I had no recollection of having fallen asleep. It was the fact that I knew something was off. I couldn't place it at first, but something felt wrong. I stood up, stretched, and tried to shake the grogginess from my mind, but the more I looked around, the more I realized that everything in my apartment had shifted just slightly. The books on my shelf, were they always there, arranged like that? The coffee mug on the table, had it been there before? I walked to the window and looked out at the city below, and it was almost as if the streetlights flickered with a strange pattern, as if they were signaling me. I pushed the thought aside. It's just the exhaustion, I told myself. You've been working too hard. You need sleep. But the next night, it happened again. I'd gone to bed at what I thought was a reasonable hour, around 10 p.m., but the moment I closed my eyes, I sank into sleep as though I was being pulled under by a current. When I woke up again, it was dark, too dark. I turned my head and glanced at the clock. 4:37 a.m. But it wasn't just the time that threw me off. It was the feeling of the room, the oppressive silence. I reached for my phone, and that's when I noticed it. The wallpaper, my phone's home screen, was completely different. A picture I didn't recognize, one of a forest bathed in golden light, with a narrow path cutting through the trees. I couldn't remember setting it as my wallpaper, but there it was. I stared at it for a moment, unsure whether to laugh or to feel unsettled, but I brushed it off. Sleep deprivation, that's all it was. The dreams, they had to be affecting me, messing with my mind. The next morning, I got up and went about my day. I made my coffee, opened my laptop, checked my emails. The routine was normal, yet there was still something lingering in the back of my mind. And then, that evening, it happened again. The dreams, I mean. The first time, it was just a vague recollection, but this time, I woke up with clear memories of what I had dreamed. I had been standing in the forest from the new wallpaper, the path ahead winding through towering trees. The air was thick with mist, and I could hear the faintest whispering voices in the distance, too faint to make out, but unsettling all the same. When I woke up, I found that my phone's wallpaper was back to normal, as though nothing had changed. But the strange thing was, I didn't remember changing it. I didn't remember putting that picture of the forest on my phone that night. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, the memory of the forest pressing in on me. I stared at my ceiling, unable to shut off the thoughts. The more I tried to focus on something else, the more the dreams began to seep into my waking hours. I would find myself zoning out at work, staring at the same wall for what felt like hours, as though I were standing in that very forest, looking down that winding path. I decided to look into it. Maybe it was a side effect of stress. Maybe I was having some sort of vivid, lucid dreams, a byproduct of pushing myself too hard. But that didn't explain the strange feeling of déjà vu I kept getting, as though I had been in those places before, even though I knew I hadn't, as though the events unfolding in the dreams were something that had already happened. Then, one night, it became impossible to ignore. I woke up in the forest. This time, it wasn't a dream. It was real. I could feel the cold air against my skin, the soft crunch of leaves beneath my feet as I walked down the narrow path. The faint whispering voices returned, louder now, filling the air with a sense of urgency. My heartbeat thudded in my chest as I looked around. The trees, the fog, the path, it was the same scene from the dreams. Only this time, I wasn't dreaming. I didn't know how it happened, but I was there. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what was happening. The air was heavy, and I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. I tried to turn back, but the path behind me was already gone, shrouded in a thick mist. I had no choice but to keep walking, the whispers growing louder, almost as if they were calling me. My feet moved on their own accord, carrying me deeper into the forest. I didn't know where I was going, but something in me told me I had to reach the end. And then, I saw it, the clearing. The place from the dreams. It was bathed in a strange golden light, and there, standing in the middle of the clearing, was a figure. A figure I knew all too well. It was me, but not me, a version of me, older, more worn, standing in the center of the light. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. My feet wouldn't move. The figure raised a hand, beckoning me closer, as the whispers crescendoed around me, urging me forward. "This is your choice," the figure whispered. "You've always known this moment was coming. It's time to wake up." And that's when I understood. The dreams, the forest, the path, it wasn't just a dream. It was something else. Something that was beginning to take over. I was no longer sure what was real, what was a dream, and what was something else entirely. Now, each day feels like a blur. I wake up, but I'm never sure if I'm awake. The dreams are no longer just dreams. They are real, and they are starting to seep into the waking world. The forest is always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for me to find my way back. I don't know how much longer I can hold on to what's real, or if I even want to anymore. I don't know where the path leads, but I can't seem to stop walking down it. And I don't think I want to. I don't know when it happened, when the lines started to blur. At first, everything felt normal, like waking up from a long night of sleep, stretching groggily, trying to piece together fragments of dreams. But then, the fragments didn't fade. They lingered, clung to me, like cobwebs I couldn't shake off. I could feel them, faint traces of memories, pulling me back into a place I couldn't quite define. I told myself it was just the haze of sleep. It was all too familiar. I had woken up like this before, hadn't I? But the more I tried to convince myself I was awake, the more uncertain I became. I reached for my phone, but when I unlocked it, the time didn't make sense. 10:32 a.m. I stared at it, blinking, wondering if I had really been asleep for that long, if that was even the right time. It didn't feel right, and the weird thing was, I couldn't remember falling asleep. I didn't recall the usual stretch of the day. The moments that led up to this moment now, standing in the half-light of my bedroom, staring at my phone screen. Everything felt wrong. I tried to push the feeling aside, but it clung to me like the stale air of a room that hadn't been opened in years. I couldn't shake it. I got up, walked across the room to the window, and pulled open the blinds. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting pale light across the street. Nothing unusual there, right? Everything outside seemed exactly as it should be. The trees swayed slightly in the wind, the distant sound of birdsong filtering through the glass. But still, something was off. I forced myself to go through my morning routine, trying to brush off the strange sensation that was crawling beneath my skin. I brewed my coffee, showered, and dressed. Everything I did felt mechanical, like I was going through the motions, but not really doing them. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt something real. I sat down at my kitchen table with my coffee, my hands shaking slightly as I sipped. The quiet of the apartment felt oppressive, like it was closing in on me. Every time I moved, I heard the faintest sound, the softest echo of footsteps. But when I looked up, there was no one there. The silence was all-encompassing, and it made my heart beat louder in my chest. And then there was the hum of the refrigerator, which I noticed for the first time that morning. It was a steady, constant sound yet, in the pit of my stomach. It felt like it was too loud, as if it had been going on for much longer than it should have. That's when I thought about it again. The thing I couldn't stop thinking about, ever since I woke up, was I awake? Or was I trapped in some kind of in-between? Maybe it was the way the light didn't quite filter through the window, or the way the shadows seemed to linger too long on the walls. I stood up, walking through the apartment, as if looking for something to snap me back to reality. But the more I moved, the more everything seemed wrong. The furniture, the pictures on the walls, everything was where it should be, but nothing looked familiar. As if someone had taken my apartment and rearranged it just enough so that it seemed like mine. But it wasn't. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming, like I had done this all before. I checked my phone again. The time hadn't changed. It was still 10:32 a.m. Suddenly, the thought hit me. What if I'm still asleep? What if I'm not really awake at all? What if everything I'm experiencing is just another dream, another layer of unconsciousness, and I haven't woken up yet? The question echoed in my mind like a hammer striking the inside of my skull. My pulse quickened. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the room, unable to move, unable to breathe. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air too thick, too heavy, pressing down on my chest. I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if I was still asleep or if I was trapped in a world that wasn't real. I needed a sign. I needed something, anything that would prove I was awake. Something that would snap me out of this limbo, this nightmare that wasn't quite a nightmare, but felt like it could be. I reached for the light switch, flicked it on and off a few times. The light didn't flicker. The light stayed on, steady, and normal, like it always did. But it didn't feel right. The flicker I expected, the glitch in the rhythm of reality, never came. My thoughts were spinning now. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. The apartment building outside was just as quiet as mine, the air cold with early morning chill, but everything looked off. The hallways were too clean, too still. I thought I could hear whispers, faint as shadows, drifting in and out of my mind. The walls seemed to bend at the edges, like the corners weren't quite straight. I looked at the door across the hall and saw a crack in the wood, just a small one. But when I blinked, it wasn't there anymore. I stumbled back into my apartment, feeling the weight of the air pressing against me, feeling the walls closing in. I had to leave. I needed to get out of this apartment, out of this space that felt too small, too fake, too constructed. I grabbed my coat, rushed to the door, and stepped outside, and that's when I saw it. Across the street, a figure stood in the middle of the sidewalk, unmoving. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. They were dressed in an old, tattered coat, and their face was obscured by the shadow of the hood. I couldn't see their eyes, but I felt them on me. I stared at the figure, and the longer I looked, the more I realized it wasn't just the figure I was staring at. It was the emptiness between us, the void that had stretched out across the street, between reality and whatever this was. And then, slowly, the figure raised their hand, pointing directly at me. My heart stopped. I had never been so terrified in my life. My feet wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of which made sense. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. Was this a dream? Was this real? Was I trapped in some endless loop of waking and sleeping? I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the figure was gone. Disappeared, like smoke on the wind. I looked around. The street was empty. Everything was quiet again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be here. That I wasn't meant to see any of this. That maybe I was still asleep, and this was just another layer to the dream. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I'll ever wake up. All I know is that I can't tell if I'm still sleeping or if I'm just trapped. I don't know how it happened. One minute I was asleep, tangled in the heavy comfort of my blankets, and the next I woke up to her screams. It wasn't just any scream, it wasn't the kind you hear in a nightmare or when someone's startled. It was a scream that felt like it was coming from somewhere deep within her, like she was clawing her way out of something painful, something beyond understanding. I bolted upright, heart racing, unsure of where I was, unsure of what was happening. I looked to my side, and there she was, on a sitting up in bed. Her face twisted in terror, her eyes wide and unfocused, staring past me like she was seeing something I couldn't. She gasped for breath, trembling, her hands clutching the sheets like they were her only anchor to reality. "Anna," I whispered, unsure what else to say. I reached out, my voice barely above a murmur. "What happened? What's wrong?" She turned to me then, her eyes locked onto mine, but it wasn't the Anna I knew. There was something foreign in her gaze, something off. The terror in her eyes was too real, too raw. It wasn't just fear, it was an urgent, desperate kind of fear. You have to stop," she breathed, her voice ragged. "You have to change it. You can't let it happen. Don't, please. Don't let it happen." My pulse quickened. "Anna, what are you talking about?" What happened? Her mouth trembled as she stared at me, the look on her face more pleading than anything I'd ever seen before. The future, she whispered, barely audible. I saw it. I saw your future, and it's terrible. You can't do this. Please, stop. I stared at her, confused, trying to make sense of the words she was saying. Anna, what do you mean? What future? She shook her head violently, her breath hitching. I saw it. I saw it all. The way you end up. The choices you make. The things you do. It's too much. It's not you. I swear it's not. You can't be that person. You can't be him. Her words hit me like a slap, but not because they made sense, because they didn't. What do you mean, the choices I make? What happened? She clutched her head, as though trying to block something out, her face contorting in pain. I can't explain it. It was too fast, too overwhelming, but it was real. I saw it. The road you're on. You're too far gone, but it's not too late. You can still change it, please. You can still stop it. The room felt smaller, darker, suffocating. I didn't know whether I should comfort her, ask more questions, or try to calm the panic that was taking over both of us. Her hands were shaking, her entire body trembling under the weight of whatever she had seen. Stop it, please, stop. It. Her voice broke as she whispered, the words almost swallowed by her fear. You have no idea what's coming. Her words left me feeling like I was suffocating, drowning in uncertainty. What could she have seen? What future? I had no idea what she was talking about, and yet I knew she was terrified, her very soul shaking from what she had experienced. I took a deep breath, trying to ground myself. I reached for her hand, gently pulling her away from the edge of panic. Anna, you're scaring me. What did you see? Please, tell me. What is it? What future? She met my eyes, and for a split second, I saw something else, something dark, something terrifying. It was a look of fear so deep that it made my heart race. It wasn't just fear of the unknown, it was the kind of fear you get when you know something bad is coming and you can't stop it. I saw you, and you were different, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not you, not this. I saw you, and you weren't the same anymore. You changed. You became someone I didn't recognize. And the choices you made, it's like you didn't care anymore. You threw everything away. You let everything burn, and I couldn't stop it. The air in the room seemed to freeze, a chill creeping into my bones. What do you mean? I would never. Her grip tightened on my hand. I know you wouldn't now. But the person I saw in the future, he wasn't the same. He wasn't you anymore. I don't know what happened, but it was like you didn't care about the people who loved you. You didn't care about anything. I couldn't stop you. I swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying, but the pieces didn't fit. This couldn't be real, could it? I couldn't imagine being that person, someone who just abandoned everything, threw away everything I had. I tried to dismiss it as a bad dream, something Anna's subconscious had conjured up. But there was something in the way she said it, so sure, so certain, that made me freeze. She was looking at me, pleading with me as though she had seen something I could never undo. I saw your future, she repeated, more insistently now, her eyes locked onto mine. You have to stop it. You can't keep going down this road, please. I pulled her into an embrace, trying to reassure her, trying to calm the storm. Inside her, Anna, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. We're okay. Everything is okay. But as I held her, the feeling that everything was not okay gnawed at the back of my mind. Because deep down, in the darkest corner of my soul, a whisper echoed, a whisper I couldn't ignore. What if she was right? What if everything she had seen wasn't just a nightmare or some kind of twisted dream? What if, one day, I became that person? The one who didn't care, the one who threw everything away. I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't stop the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, the future she saw was mine. And if I didn't change something, I would wake up one day, just like she said, and realize that I'd already lost everything. That thought was too much to bear. But it wasn't just the fear of what was coming. It was the terrifying realization that the choices I made today might already be setting me on that path. A path I could never turn back from. It was just another ordinary evening, or at least, that's what I thought. I had been feeling unusually tired, but then again, I had been working late for weeks, burning the candle at both ends. So, when I finally climbed into bed that night, I thought I would just close my eyes for a little while, maybe take a short nap, and wake up refreshed. But I didn't wake up. At least, not in the way I expected. When I opened my eyes, the world felt wrong. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the usual quiet of the night. It was a stillness that felt unnerving, almost suffocating. The air felt thick, like I was breathing through a fog that wouldn't clear. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and sat up in bed. My body ached, as if I hadn't moved in years. I looked around my room, trying to ground myself in the familiar my dresser, my bookshelf, my desk all in their usual places. But then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The clock on the wall. It read 7:43 a.m. I knew that wasn't right. I had gone to bed hours ago, and the last time I looked at the clock, before closing my eyes, it had been just after midnight. But this was impossible. I couldn't have slept for that long. I must have just lost track of time somehow. Maybe I'd been more exhausted than I realized. But then I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. There were dust particles in the air, more than I'd ever seen before. I squinted, reaching for my phone to check the time, but when I unlocked it, the date sent a jolt of panic through me. It read, October 15th, 2043. I froze, staring at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. The last time I checked the calendar, it was 2023. I had been living my life in the present, struggling with deadlines and responsibilities, just like everyone else. So how could this be? How could 20 years have passed without my knowing? My heart pounded in my chest as I scrambled out of bed, stumbling slightly as my legs felt weak beneath me. I rushed to the window and pulled back the curtains. The first thing I noticed was the skyline. It wasn't the same as it had been. I lived in a city that I knew well, but this wasn't right. The buildings were taller, the roads busier, and the streets were filled with vehicles I didn't recognize. I stepped back from the window, my mind racing. How could this be happening? I grabbed my phone again, checking the calendar one more time. The date was still the same. October 15th, 2043. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I had been asleep for 20 years, I felt my stomach lurch, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. I staggered back from the window, almost tripping over my own feet. My head was spinning. The reality of what I was seeing, what I was living, felt impossible. How could I have been unconscious for so long? How could time have slipped away without me even realizing it? I had to get answers. I needed to understand what had happened. I grabbed my coat, my hands shaking as I pulled it on, and rushed out the door. The world outside was too much to take in at once. Everything had changed. People walked around, their faces glowing with devices I didn't recognize, talking into thin air like they were carrying on conversations with ghosts. I felt like an alien in my own world. I walked to the local diner, the one I had always gone to, the place I knew like the back of my hand. But even the diner had changed. It had been renovated, new paint on the walls, brighter lights, a sleeker design, but it still felt familiar, like it had somehow held on to the essence of what it once was. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, and the sound was enough to make me pause. Everything felt too loud, like the world had suddenly turned up the volume on everything. I looked around, spotting the waitress behind the counter, her face soft and kind. I walked over to her, trying to steady my breath. She smiled at me when she saw me approach. "Morning, haven't seen you in a while. You okay?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out. I couldn't explain it. How could I explain the fact that I had been asleep for 20 years? How could I even begin to process the reality of that? "Are you okay?" she asked again, this time with more concern. I started, but my voice faltered. I cleared my throat, trying again. "What year is it?" She raised an eyebrow, her smile faltering for a split second. "It's 2043, hun. What's wrong with you today?" I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. She couldn't have been serious. How was this even possible? I needed answers. I needed someone to explain what was happening. I reached into my pocket for my wallet, but my hand stopped short when I felt the slight weight of something unfamiliar inside it. It was a small, smooth chip. I pulled it out and stared at it, confused. It looked like a card, but it wasn't plastic. There were no edges or identifying marks. It was just there. I turned it over in my hand, inspecting it, but nothing about it made sense. The waitress noticed it in my hand and raised an eyebrow. "Where did you get that? Haven't seen one of those in years." My head was spinning, my mind racing. "What is this?" I asked, my voice shaking. She looked at the chip and sighed. "You've been out of it, haven't you? That's a new ID chip. Haven't you had one before?" They replaced IDs with chips about 15 years ago. "You've been living under a rock or something." 15 years ago, that wasn't possible. But it explained the chip. It explained the changes to the world, the things I didn't recognize. It explained why I felt so out of place, like I had stepped into someone else's life. But what I still didn't understand, what I couldn't comprehend, was why I had been asleep for so long. Why did everything look so different? Why did I feel like a stranger in my own skin? And why, after all these years, was I still trying to catch up with a world that had moved on without me? I didn't know. I still don't know. But every day since then, I've tried to piece together the fragments of my life, the parts that seem so familiar, and yet so impossibly distant. And every time I look at the clock, I can't help but feel that strange sense of unreality, like I'm still asleep, still dreaming, because I don't remember how I woke up. I don't remember falling asleep. All I know is that the clock says I've been asleep for 20 years.